we'll be reading tonight the Lost Book of Enki here. This is the introduction. Some 445,000 years ago, astronauts from another planet came to Earth in search of gold. Splashing down in one of the Earth's seas, they waded ashore and established Eridu, home in the faraway. In time, the initial settlement expanded to a full-fledged mission Earth with a mission control center, a spaceport, mining operations, and even a way station on Mars. And there's lots of evidence of that. I mean, it absolutely is to me no coincidence. And anybody wants to make you believe it's a coincidence is a liar. That the original area of what is now Iraq, formerly Mesopotamia, was called, before it was Mesopotamia, was called Cydonia. Sorry, I had a brain fart there for a minute. And the area also on Mars where the face was found is also on Cydonia. Coincidentally enough, both places are also located on the 33rd degree parallel. Yes, you heard me right. Ancient Mesopotamia was, or is also, Iraq, also located on the 33rd degree parallel, formerly known as Cydonia. Cydonia on Mars, where the face is located, is also on the 33rd degree parallel. As we talked about earlier with 33, no coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. So, I got to say the idea of the way station thing, definitely a lot of evidence to support that. Short of manpower, the astronauts employed genetic engineering to fashion primitive workers, Homo sapiens. It says Horno sapiens, so maybe that's a misprint. Homo sapiens. The deluge that catastrophically swept over the Earth required a fresh start. The astronauts became gods, granting mankind civilization, teaching it to worship. Then, about 4,000 years ago, all that had been achieved unraveled in a nuclear calamity brought about by the visitors to Earth in the course of their own rivalries and wars. Exactly what I talked about earlier. So that's coincidental yet again. This is going to be a good read, I think. I can already tell. We're starting to see synchronicities already. Exactly what I described earlier with the Bhagavad Gita. The pre-flood ash. What had taken place on Earth, and especially the events since human history began, has been culled by Zecharia Sitchin in his The Earth Chronicle series from the Bible, clay tablets, ancient myths, and archaeological discoveries. But what had preceded the events on Earth, what had taken place on the astronauts' own planet Nibiru that caused the space journeys, the need for gold, the creation of man, what emotions, rivalries, beliefs, morals, or lack thereof motivated the principal players in the celestial and space sagas? What were the relationships that caused mounting tensions on Nibiru and on Earth? What tensions arose between old and young, between those who had come from Nibiru and those who were born on Earth? And to what extent was what happened determined by destiny, a destiny whose record of past events holds the key to the future? Would it not be auspicious were one of the key players an eyewitness and one who could distinguish between fate and destiny to record for posterity the how and where and when and why of it all, the first things and perhaps the last things? But that is precisely what some of them did do, and foremost among them was the very leader who had commanded the first group of astronauts. Scholars and theologians alike now recognize that the biblical tales of creation, of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, the Deluge, the Tower of Babel, were based on texts written down millennia earlier in Mesopotamia. Now, keep in mind as well, folks, this is, again, why in 2003, in the invasion of Iraq, they went into the Iraq National Museum, stole all the artifacts pertaining to ancient Mesopotamia, the little reptilian alien statues, all the cylinder seals, all that stuff. This is why. And so the Adam and Eve, the tales of creation, the Garden of Eden, the Deluge, the Tower of Babel, were based on texts written down millennia earlier in Mesopotamia, especially by the Sumerians. And they, in turn, clearly stated that they obtained their knowledge of past events, many from a time before civilizations began, even before mankind came to be, from the writings of the Anunnaki. From those from heaven to earth came the gods of antiquity. As a result result of a century and a half of archaeological discoveries in the ruins of the ancient civilizations, especially in the Near East, a great number of such early texts have been found. The finds have also revealed the extent of missing texts, so-called lost books, which are either mentioned in discovered texts or are inferred from such texts, or that are known to have existed because they were cataloged in royal or temple libraries. Sometimes the secrets of the gods were partly revealed in epic tales, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh. That disclosed the debate among the gods that led to the decision to let mankind perish in the deluge, or in a text titled Atra Hasis, which recalled the mutiny of the Anunnaki who had toiled in the gold mines that led to the creation of primitive worker earthlings. From time to time, the leaders of the astronauts themselves authored compositions, sometimes dictating the text to a chosen scribe, as the text called the Era Epos, in which one of the two gods who had caused the nuclear calamity sought to shift the blame to his adversary. Sometime the god acted as his own scribe, as is the case regarding the book of the secrets of Thoth, the Egyptian god of knowledge, which the god had secreted in a subterranean chamber. When the Lord God Yahweh, according to the Bible, granted the commandments to his chosen people, he first inscribed in his own hand 2 stone tablets that he gave to Moses on Mount Sinai. When Moses threw down and broke that first set of tablets in response to the golden calf incident, the replacement set was written by Moses on the tablets on both their sides when he stayed on the mount 40 days and 40 nights, recording the dictated words of the Lord. Were it not for a tale recorded on papyrus from the time of the Egyptian king Khufu concerning the book of the secrets of Thoth, the existence of that book would have not become known. Were it not for the biblical narratives in Exodus and Deuteronomy, we would have never known about the divine tablets and their contents. All would have become part of the enigmatic body of lost books whose very existence would have never come to light. No less painful is the fact that in some instances we do know that certain texts had existed, but are in the dark regarding their contents. Such is the case regarding the book of the Wars of Yahweh and the book of Dasher, or also known as the book of Righteousness, which are specifically mentioned in the Bible. In at least 2 instances, the existence of olden books, earlier texts known to the biblical narrator, can be inferred. Chapter 5 of Genesis, with the statement, "This is the book of the Toldoth of Adam." The term Toldoth being usually translated as generations, but more accurately meaning historic or genealogical record. Yeah, the book of the record of Adam, or the genealogy of Isis. That's what it really means. That's what the book of Genesis means. So that's interesting that chapter 5 of Genesis begins with a statement, "This is the book of Toldoth of Adam," of the Toldoth of Adam, meaning the genealogical record of Adam. Well, Adam supposedly is is what we know in Egyptian mythology as you have Isis, Osiris, and Horus. And that's the Trinity. That's where what we know as the Holy Trinity comes from. It's just amazing stuff. Wow. So that's exactly what the book of Genesis means. Yeah. So this is the book of Toldoth of Adam. The term Toldoth being usually translated as generations, or meaning historic or genealogical record. The other instances in chapter 6 of Genesis, where the events concerning Noah and the deluge begin with the words, "These are the Toldoth of Noah." Indeed, partial versions of a book that became known as the book of Adam and Eve have survived over the millennia in Armenian, Slovak, Syriac, and Ethiopic languages. And the book of Enoch, one of the so-called apocryphal books that were not included in the canonized Bible. They contain segments that are considered by scholars to be fragments of a much earlier book of Noah. An oft-quoted example of the extent of lost books is that of the famed Library of Alexandria in Egypt. Established by the general Ptolemy after Alexander's death in 323 BC, it was said to have contained more than 500,000 volumes of books inscribed on a variety of materials, clay, stone, papyrus, parchment, etc. That great library, where scholars gathered to study the accumulated knowledge, was burnt down and destroyed in the wars that extended from 48 BC to the Arab conquest in AD 642. What has remained of its treasures is a translation of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible into Greek and fragments retained in the writings of some of the library's resident scholars. It is only thus that we know that the second King Ptolemy commissioned, circa 270 BC, an Egyptian priest whom the Greeks called Mantho, to compile the history and prehistory of Egypt. At first, Mantho wrote, only the gods reigned there, then demigods, and finally, circa 3100 BC, pharaonic dynasties began. The divine reigns, he wrote, began 10,000 years before the flood and continued for thousands of years thereafter, the latter period having witnessed battles and wars among the gods. In the Asiatic domains of Alexander, where reign fell into the hands of the general, Seleucus and his successors, a similar effort to provide the Greek servants with a record of past events took place. A priest of the Babylonian god Marduk, Berosus, with access to libraries of clay tablets whose core was the temple library of Haran, now in southeastern Turkey, wrote down in 3 volumes a history of gods and men that began 432,000 years before the deluge, when the gods came to earth from the heavens, listing by name and reign durations the first 10 commanders. Berosus reported that the first leader, dressed as a fish, waded ashore from the sea. He was the one who gave mankind civilization, and his name, rendered in Greek, was Khams. Dovetailing in many details, both priests thus rendered accounts of gods of heaven who had come to earth of a time when gods alone reigned on earth, and of the catastrophic deluge. In the fragmentary bits and pieces retained in other contemporary writings from the 3 volumes, Berosus specifically reported the existence of writings from before the great flood stone tablets that were hidden for safekeeping in an ancient city called Sippar, one of the original cities established by the ancient gods. Though Sippar, as were other pre-diluvial cities of the gods, was overwhelmed and obliterated by the deluge, a reference to the pre-diluvial writings surfaced in the annals of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal when archaeologists in the 19th century found the ancient Assyrian capital, Nineveh, until then known only from the Old Testament. They discovered in the ruins of a palace with the remains of some 25,000 inscribed clay tablets. An assiduous collector of olden texts, Ashurbanipal boasted in his annals, "The god of scribes has bestowed upon me the gift of the knowledge of his art. I have been initiated into the secrets of writing. I can even read the intricate tablets in Sumerian. I understand the enigmatic words in the stone carvings from the days before the flood." It is now known that the Sumerian or Sumerian civilization had blossomed in what is now Iraq almost a millennium before the beginning of the Pharaonic age in Egypt, both to be followed later by the civilization of the Indus Valley in the Indian subcontinent. It is now also known that the Sumerians were the first to write down the annals of tales of gods and men, from which all other peoples, including the Hebrews, obtained the tales of creation of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, the deluge, the Tower of Babel, and of the wars and loves of the gods, as reflected in the writings and recollections of the Greeks, Hittites, Canaanites, Persians, and Indo-Europeans. As all these olden writings attest, their sources were even earlier texts, some found, but many lost. The volume of such early writings is staggering. Not thousands, but tens of thousands of clay tablets have been discovered in the ruins of the ancient Near East. Many deal with or record aspects of daily life, such as trade or workers' wages and nuptial contracts. Others, found mostly in palace libraries, constitute royal annals. Still others, discovered in the ruins of temple libraries or of scribal schools, constitute a group of canonized texts. A secret literature that were written down in the Sumerian language and then translated to Akkadian, the first Semitic language, and then other ancient languages. And even in those early writings going back almost 6,000 years, references are made to lost books, texts inscribed on the stone tablets. Among the incredible, to say fortunate, does not fully convey the miracle finds in the ruins of ancient cities and their libraries. there are clay prisms inscribed with the very information about the 10 pre-Diluvian rulers and their 432,000 years total reign to which Berosus had referred, known as the Sumerian king lists. Let me get a drink here. Known as the Sumerian king lists and on display in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, England. Their several versions leave no doubt that their Sumerian compilers had access to some earlier common or canonized textual material. Coupled with other equally early texts discovered in various states of preservation, they strongly suggest that the original recorder of the arrival, as well as of the preceding events and certainly of the following events, had to be one of those leaders, a key participant and an eyewitness. One who had been an eyewitness to all those events, indeed a key participant in them, was the leader who had splashed down with the first group of astronauts. At that time, his epitaph name was Ea, E-A, he whose home is water. He experienced the disappointment of having command of Earth mission given to his half-brother and rival Enlil, Lord of the Command. A humiliation little mitigated by granting him the title Enki, Lord of Earth. Relegated away from the cities of the gods and their spaceport in the Eden, E-D-I-N, which, of course, Eden, to supervise the mining of gold in the Abzu, which was in southeastern Africa. It was Ea Enki, a great scientist who came across the hominids who inhabited those parts. And so when the Anunnaki toiling in the gold mines mutinied and said, "No more," it was he who realized that the needed manpower could be obtained by jumping the gun on evolution through genetic engineering, and thus did the Adam, literally, he of the earth, earthling, came into being. As a hybrid, the Adam could not procreate. The events echoed in the biblical tale of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden record the second genetic manipulation by Enki that added the extra chromosomal genes needed for sexual procreation. And when mankind proliferating did not turn out the way it had been envisaged, it was he, Enki, who defied his brother Enlil's plans to let mankind perish in the deluge. The events whose hero has been called Noah in the Bible and Zusudra in the earlier original Sumerian text. The firstborn son of Anu, Nibiru's ruler Ea Enki, was well versed in his planets and its inhabitants' past. And this is this is where I start to already have problems with this. I'm not convinced that I don't believe 100% what they tell us. You know, the Anunnaki came from Nibiru and all that. I don't believe that. I still think that's a red herring. But that's what you always see Sitchin referring to, and I still just don't. The archaeological stuff doesn't point in that direction. It points more in the direction of Sirius or Cygnus or Polaris. I mean, it just doesn't point in the direction of some planet that we have. We may or may not have ever even really identified. We have hard evidence that points archaeological things like the pyramids and Göbekli Tepe, and I mean, you've got all these ancient megalithic sites all around the world lined up to stars, to certain systems. And then you see things like the Freemasons being obsessed with Sirius and the whole star system's there, and then the Dogon. And I mean, I just have a hard time believing that the Anunnaki came. They just don't seem to have come from within our own solar system. I have a hard time believing that. An accomplished scientist, he bequeathed his most important aspects of advanced knowledge of the Anunnaki, especially to his two sons, Marduk and Ningishzida, who as Egyptian gods were known there as Ra and Thoth, respectively. But he also was instrumental in sharing with mankind certain aspects of such advanced knowledge by teaching to selected individuals the secrets of the gods. In at least two instances, such initiates wrote down, as they were instructed to do, those divine teachings as mankind's heritage. Right, that's what I was referencing earlier in the show, our birthright. That's what they were instructing him to write down. One called Adapa, and probably a son of Enki by a human female, is known to have written a book titled Writings Regarding Time, one of the earliest lost books. The other, called the Edmund Durang, let me get this right, the Enmed Uranki, the Enmed Uranki, Enmeduranki, the Enmed Uranki, another one of the books that was supposed to be our birthright, was in all probability the prototype of the biblical Enoch, the one who was taken up into heaven after he had entrusted his sons the book of divine secrets, and of which a version has possibly survived in the extra-biblical book of Enoch. Though the firstborn of Anu, he was not destined to be his father's successor on the throne of Nibiru. Complex rules of succession, which reflected the convoluted history of their planet, gave the privilege to Enki's half-brother Enlil. And Enlil is also that's where the whole thing of, Jesus and the devil comes from, that whole, that whole dynamic. That's in Enlil and Enki. That's what the two twin towers represented, Enlil and Enki. It's a pretty good signal of bringing those things down, bringing down Enlil and Enki, that, these custodial rulers definitely, you want to get down to who really pulled off 9/11, there you go. In the effort to resolve the bitter conflict, both Enki and Enlil ended up on a mission to an alien planet Earth, whose goal was needed to create a shield for preserving Nibiru's dwindling atmosphere. It was against that background, made even more complex by the presence on Earth of their half-sister Ninarshag, the chief medical officer of the Anunnaki, that Enki decided to defy Enlil's plans to have mankind perish in the deluge. The conflict carried on between the two half-brother sons, even among their grandchildren. The fact that all of them, and especially those born on Earth, faced the loss of longevity that Nibiru's extended orbital period provided, added personal agonies and sharpened ambitions. It all came to a climax in the last century of the third millennium BC, when Marduk, Enki's firstborn by his official spouse, claimed that he and not Enlil's firstborn son, Ninurta, should inherit the earth. The bitter conflict that included a series of wars led in the end to the use of nuclear weapons. And that's what I was mentioning earlier when the listener had asked me about, the sun symbols. And that's why I said I think it has something to do with nuclear weapons and extraterrestrials, because, Polaris, the long-range nuclear missiles launched by submarines, and also the, just the whole thing with how they use nuclear weapons on Earth, and that being the North Star and all those sun symbols. Again, when you see those depictions of the sun in Egyptian things or anything else, it's not. That doesn't always mean our sun or our star. It could mean someone else's a star somewhere else. That's what people never think. They never teach you that in school. People need to know that information. It's very key. It changes everything once you know that. The bitter conflict that included a series of wars led to the end of the use of nuclear weapons. The ensuing, though unintended, result was the demise of the Sumerian civilization. And that's true, because that's one of the things that they will admit to, actually, in a high school textbook. The Sumerians disappeared. Gone, poof, in the wind, in the dust. Some people think they got raptured out by aliens, but I think probably the more, I think what I believe is that they were vaporized by the use of these extraterrestrial nuclear weapons. And again, the reason I believe that is because, as we talked about earlier, the pre-flood ash. The initiation of chosen individuals into the secrets of the gods had marked the beginning of priesthood, the lineages of mediators between the gods and the people, the transmitters of the divine words to the mortal earthlings. Oracles' interpretations of divine utterances were commingled with the observation of the heavens for omens. And as mankind was increasingly drawn to take sides in the godly conflicts, prophecy began to play a role. Indeed, the term to denote such spokesmen of the gods who proclaimed what was to come, Nabi, was the epitaph for Marduk's firstborn son, Nabu, who had tried on behalf of his exiled father to convince mankind that the heavenly signs bespoke the coming supremacy of Marduk. These developments sharpen the realization that one must distinguish between fate and destiny. The proclamations of Enlil, sometimes even of Anu, that used to be unquestioned were now subjected to the scrutiny of the difference between Nam and destiny, like the planetary orbits, whose course had been determined and was unchangeable, and Namtar, literally, a destiny that could be bent, broken, changed, which was fate. Reviewing and recalling the sequence of events and the apparent parallelism between what had happened on Nibiru and what took place on Earth, Enki and Enlil began to ponder philosophically what indeed was destined and could not have been avoided, and what was just fated as a consequence of right or wrong decisions and free choice. The latter could not be predicted. The former could be foreseen, especially if all, as the planetary orbits, was cyclical. If what was shall be again, if the first things shall also be the last things. The climactic event of the nuclear desolation sharpened soul-searching among the leaders of the Anunnaki and raised the need to explain to the devastated human masses why it came to pass this way. Was it destined, or was it just the result of an Anunnaki-made fate? Was anyone responsible? Is there someone accountable? In the councils of the Anunnaki on the eve of the calamity, it was Enki who stood alone in opposition to the use of the forbidden weapon. It was thus important for Enki to explain to the suffering remnants that the turning point in the saga of extraterrestrials, who had meant well but ended as destroyers, had come to pass, and who but Ea Enki, who was the first to come and be an eyewitness to it all, was the most qualified to tell the people so that the future could be divined. And what was the best way to tell that it was all a first-person report by Enki himself? This is kind of in broken English. I apologize. I know how to read, but and the best way to tell it was all as a first-person report by Enki himself. It's just, I don't think Zechariah Sitchin spoke good English. I'm reading it exactly as it is on the page, and some of this stuff I'm having to like improvise because it's just bad English. I hate that. It's like every time I find a book I want to read, it's written by a fucking first grader. Sucks. That he had recorded his autobiography is certain, for a long text stretching over at least 12 tablets was discovered in a library. Nippur quotes Urki as saying, "When I approached the earth, there was much flooding. When I neared its green meadows, heaps and mounds were piled up at my command. In a pure place, I built my house. An appropriate name I gave it." The long text continues to describe how Ea, or Enki, then assigned tasks to his lieutenants, putting their mission to Earth in motion. Numerous other texts that relate varied aspects of Enki's role in the ensuing developments serve to complete Enki's tale. They include a cosmogony, an epic of creation at whose core lay Enki's own text, which scholars call the Eridu Genesis. They include detailed descriptions of the fashioning of the atom. They describe how other Anunnaki, male and female, came to Enki in his city Eridu to obtain from him a kind of data disk that encoded all aspects of civilization, and they include text of Enki's private life and personal problems, such as the tale of his attempts to attain a son by his half-sister Ninarshak, his promiscuous affair with both goddesses and the daughters of man, and the unforeseen consequences thereof. The Atra Hasis text throws light on Anu's efforts to prevent a flare-up of the Enki-Enlil rivalries by dividing Earth's domains between them. And texts recording the events preceding the deluge render almost verbatim the debates in the Council of the Gods about the fate of mankind and Enki's subterfuge known as the Tale of Noah and the Ark tale known from the Bible, until one of its original Mesopotamian versions was found in the tablets in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Sumerian and Akkadian clay tablets, Babylonian and Assyrian temple libraries, Egyptian, Hittite, and Canaanite myths, and the biblical narratives are the main body of written down memories of the affairs of gods and men. For the first time ever, this dispersed and fragmented material has been assembled and used by Zechariah Sitchin to recreate the eyewitness accounts of Enki, the autobiographical memoirs and insightful prophecies of an extraterrestrial God. Presented as a text dictated by Enki to a chosen scribe, a book of witnessing to the unsealed to be unsealed at an appropriate time. It brings to mind Yahweh's instructions to the prophet Isaiah. Now come, write it on a sealed tablet as a book and engrave it. Let it be the witnessing until the last day, a testimony for all time. In dealing with the past, Enki himself perceived the future. The notion that the Anunnaki, exercising free will, were masters of their own fates, as well as the fate of mankind, gave way in the end to a realization that it was destiny, that when all was said and done, determined the course of events, and therefore, as the Hebrew prophets had recognized, the first things shall be the last things. The record of events dictated by Enki thus becomes a foundation for prophecy, and the past becomes the future. In the 7th year after the great calamity, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day, I was summoned by my master, the Lord Enki, great God, benevolent fashioner of mankind, omnipotent and merciful. I was among the remnants of Eridu who had escaped to the arid steppe just as the evil wind was nearing the city. The evil wind nearing the city, a nuclear blast. And I wandered off into the wilderness to seek withered twigs for firewood. And I looked up, and to behold, a whirlwind came out of the south. Maybe it was a UFO landing. There was a reddish brilliance about it, and it made no sound. Well, a lot of UFOs have been described as making no sound, haven't they? And as it reached the ground, 4 straight feet spread out from its belly, and brilliance appeared. I mean, come on. 4? You got to give me a fucking break. You know? 4 little feet come right out of it. Lands, just classic flying saucer here. You know? This is what I'm saying. Are you now you read that, and it just makes total sense to you why the first thing they did during the invasion of Iraq in 2003 was to invade the Baghdad Museum and take all of these cylinder seals and clay tablets that have all this information in it. You know, when people started figuring out that, you know, it openly talks about UFOs landing on the ground, that started to become a problem for the power structure, considering Saddam Hussein was about to create this gigantic new library and put all of this stuff out there for people to see. And what they were going to see, he was going to also reveal was that the inhabitants of Iraq that originated there from ancient Mesopotamia were truly God's chosen people. And that was actually the land talked about in biblical times, and that, you know, the Jews and what we know as Semites, not non-Arabs, were the imposters. So, you know, that combined with, you know, a library where you could go see for yourself and translate for yourself stuff like this, where it's clearly talking about UFOs landing on the ground. I mean, my goodness, now you know what this whole thing has been about. Now you know why they're obsessed with antiquities. 4 straight feet spread out from its belly, and the brilliance appeared. Brilliance means a bright light. So 4 legs came out of a whirlwind with no sound, and a bright light came out of the center of it. And I threw myself to the ground and prostrated myself, for I knew that it was a divine vision. Of course, you know, UFOs land. These people don't have any idea what this technology is. Their only reference point is that it's God's. And when I lifted my eyes, there were 2 divine emissaries standing near me. And they had the faces of men, and their garments were sparkling like burnished brass. And they called me by name and spoke to me, saying, "You are summoned by the great God, the Lord Enki. Fear not, you are blessed. And we are here to take you aloft and carry you unto his retreat in the land of Magan, on the island amidst the river of Magan, where the sluices are." Sluices. S-L-U-I-S-E-S. Don't know what that is, but S-L-U-I-C-E-S. Sluices. And they spoke. The whirlwind lifted itself as a fiery chariot and was gone. And they took me by my hands, each one grasping me by one hand, and they lifted me and carried me swiftly between the earth and the heavens. Yeah, our first documented abduction here. and carried me between the earth and heavens as the eagle soars, and I could see the land and the waters. I mean, my goodness, classic UFO abduction. The plains and the mountains, and they let me down on the island at the gateway of the great God's abode. And the moment that they let go of my hands, a brilliance as I had never seen before engulfed and overwhelmed me. And I collapsed on the ground as though voided of the spirit of life. My life senses returned to me as if awakened from the deepest sleep by the sound of the calling of my name. I was in some kind of an enclosure. It was dark, but there was also an aura. Then my name was called again by the deepest of voices. And although I could hear it, I could not tell whence the voice came, nor can I see whoever it was that spoke. And I said, "Here I am." Then the voice said to me, "In Dubsar, offspring of Adapa, I have chosen you to be my scribe, that you write down my words on the tablets." And all at once there appeared a glowing in one part of the enclosure. And I saw a place arranged like a scribal workplace, a scribe's table and a scribe's stool. And there were finely shaped stones upon the table, but I saw no clay tablets nor containers of wet clay. And there lay upon the table only one stylus, and it glistened in the glowing as no reed stylus ever did. It was a computer. You scribed it on a computer, yeah. And the voice spoke up again, saying, "In Dubsar, son of Eridu city, my faithful servant, I am your Lord Enki. I have summoned you to write down my words, for I am much distraught by what has befallen mankind by the great calamity. It is my wish to record the true course of the events, to let gods and men alike know that my hands are clean. Not since the great deluge had such a calamity befallen the earth and the gods and the earthlings. But the great deluge was destined to happen. Not so the great calamity. This one, 7 years ago, need not have happened. It could have been prevented, and I, Enki, did all I could to prevent it. Alas, I failed. And was it fate or was it destiny? In the future shall it be judged, for at the end of days a day of judgment there shall be. On that day the earth shall quake, and the river shall change course. And there shall be darkness at noon, and a fire in the heavens in the night. The day of the returning celestial God will it be. And who shall survive, and who would perish? Who shall be rewarded, and who will be punished? Gods and men alike on that day shall it be discovered. For what shall come to pass by what had passed shall be determined, and what was destined shall in a cycle be repeated. And what was fated and only by the heart's will occurring for good, or I shall for judgment come. The voice fell silent. Then the great Lord spoke up again, saying, "It is for this reason that I will tell the true account of the beginnings and of the prior times and of the olden times. For in the past the future lies hidden. For 40 days and 40 nights shall I speak, and you will write. 40 shall be the count of the days and the nights of your task here. For 40 is my sacred number among the gods. For 40 days and 40 nights you shall neither eat nor drink. Only this once of bread and water you shall partake, and it shall sustain you for the duration of your task." And the voice paused, and all at once there appeared a glowing in another part of the enclosure. And I saw a table, and upon it a plate and a cup. And I rose up there too, and there was bread on the plate and water in the cup. And the voice of the great Lord Enki spoke up again, saying, "In Dubsar, eat the bread and drink the water, and be sustained for 40 days and 40 nights. And I did as directed. And therefore the voice directed me to sit myself at the scribal table, and the glowing there intensified. I could see neither door nor aperture where I was, yet the glowing was as strong as the midday sun. And the voice said, "In Dubsar, the scribe, what do you see?" And I looked, and I saw the glowing rate upon the table, and the stones, and the stylus. And I said, "I see stone tablets, and their hue is blue as pure as the sky. And I see a stylus, as I have never seen before, its stem unlike any reed, and its tip like an eagle's talon." And the voice said, "These are the tablets upon which you shall inscribe my words. By my wish, they have been cut of the finest lapis lazuli, each with 2 smooth faces provided. And the stylus you see is a god's handiwork, its handle made of electrum, and its tip of divine crystal. It shall firmly fit in your hand, and what you shall engrave with it shall be as easy as marking upon wet clay. In 2 columns you shall inscribe the front face. In 2 columns you shall inscribe the back of each stone tablet. Do not deviate from my words and utterances. And there was a pausing, and I touched one of the stones, and the surface thereof felt like a smooth skin, soft to the touch. And I picked up the holy stylus, and it felt like a feather in my hand. And then the great god Enki began to speak, and I began to write down his words exactly as he had spoken them. At times his voice was strong, at times almost a whisper. At times there was a joy or pride in his voice, at times pain or agony. And as one tablet was inscribed on all its faces, I took another to continue. And when the final words were spoken, the great god paused, and I could hear a great sigh. And he said, "In Dubsar, my servant, for 40 days and 40 nights you have faithfully recorded my words. Your task here is completed. Now take hold of another tablet, and on it you shall write your own attestation. And at the end thereof, as a witness, mark it with your seal, and take the tablet and put it together with those other tablets in the divine chest. For at a designated time, chosen ones shall come hither, and they shall find the chest and the tablets. And they shall learn all that I have dictated to you, and that true account of the beginnings and the prior times, and the olden times, and the great calamity shall henceforth be known as the words of the Lord Enki. And it shall be a book of witnessing of the past, and a book of foretelling the future. For the future in the past lies, and the first things shall also be the last things." Which means if in the beginning there were gods on earth, that means in the end there's going to be gods on earth. And there was a pause, and I took the tablets and I put them one by one in their correct order in the chest. And the chest was made of acacia wood, and it was inlaid with gold on the outside. Sounds like the Ark of the Covenant, doesn't it? And the voice of my Lord said, "Now close the chest, cover and fasten its lock." And I did as directed. And there was another pause, and my Lord Enki said, "And as for you in Dubsar, with a great God you have spoken. And though you have not seen me in my presence, you have been. Therefore you are blessed, and my spokesman to the people you shall be. You shall admonish them to be righteous, for in that lies a good and long life. And you shall comfort them, for in 70 years the cities will be rebuilt, and the crops shall sprout again. There will be peace, but there will also be wars. New nations will become mighty. Kingdoms shall rise and fall. The olden gods shall step aside, and new gods shall decree the fates. But at the end of days, destiny shall prevail. And of that future it is foretold in my words about the past. All of that in Dubsar to the people you shall tell." And there was a pause and a silence, and I, Dubsar, bowed to the ground and said, "But how will I know what to say?" And the voice of the Lord Enki said, "The signs will be in the heavens, and the words to utter shall come to you in dreams and in visions. And after you are there, and after you, there will be another chosen prophet and other chosen prophets. And in the end, there will be a new earth and a new heaven. And for prophets, there will be no more need." And then there was silence, and the auras were extinguished, and the spirit left me. And when I regained my senses, I was in the fields outside Eridu. So there you go. There's the end of that. Now we're moving on here. The words of Lord Enki, synopsis of the first tablet, lamentation over the desolation of Sumir. We're going to continue in our reading from the Lost Book of Enki. Interesting stuff here. And especially interesting to sort of, that's why I wanted to follow up the Gods of Eden that we read with William Bramley with this one. You know, follow up now that we got the premise, now that we figure, you know, we've gotten that added into the vocabulary. I think that was the best thing I think that I took away from reading that. And hopefully you took that away too, was that it sort of added, you know, the other pieces of the picture to this worldview of, you know, the New World Order and the Illuminati and the whole thing. It did for me anyway. And I think that now that since we've done that, now reading, you know, actually stuff that's, you know, from the Sumerian tablets and whatnot is highly interesting. So we're going to jump back into that. TheGlobalReality.com. That's www.theglobalreality.com. That is my website where this broadcast originates from. And it says, I got an email here, another email from Lori. Lori says, "Hey, Josh, I'm glad you're reading this book. I really enjoy your commentary while reading these books. A lot of things pop in your head that aren't popping in mine." While you're reading Gods of Eden, I started reading the Lost Book of Enki. You started reading that as I was reading Gods of Eden? That's odd. It's a hard read and kind of reads like the Bible. This father, son, brothers, cousins, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I looked up some of the changes of some of these guys in the book. Like Murdoch is also Ra. Don't know if they are right or not. Yeah, well, that's true. Murdoch, Ra, you know, a lot of the ones that started out as Sumerian ones later became the verbatim the same ones that were in Egyptian mythology and stuff. So yeah, absolutely the same gods. They just had different names. But anyway, there you go. So thanks so much to Lori for that. Again, chipping banner donate button is there at the website, and we need to be getting in more support than we have over this past week. We need an influx of cash right now because we're just trying to get getting back on the track and get back on getting be able to get the film out very soon. I'm shooting for middle of July for Seagram Volume 2. And just trying to, after losing a couple of weeks with all the stuff that was going on, I'm trying to get back on doing that. So any support we can get, chipping banner, donate button, anything we can get in right now would be great. And we don't get a lot of stuff over the weekends when we don't have shows. And, we could really use it right now. So because with paying the stream bill and stuff right now, we're not going to have anything we're going to be at zero after that. So we could use some help right now. I want to put that out there and let everybody know that it is serious. I'm not just saying, donate like it's every day or something. We do need to get some stuff in. If you're hearing this on a rebroadcast or something, then please donate if you can. All right. Synopsis of the first tablet, lamentation over the desolation of Sumer. How the gods fled their cities as the nuclear cloud spread. The debates in the council of the gods, the fateful decision to unleash the weapons of terror. The origin of the gods and the awesome weapons on Nibiru. Nibiru's north-south wars, unification and dynastic rules. Nibiru's place in the solar system. A dwindling atmosphere causes climate changes. Efforts to obtain gold to shield the atmosphere fail. Alalu, a usurper, uses nuclear weapons to stir volcanic gases. Anu, a dynastic heir, disposes Alalu. Alalu steals a spacecraft and escapes from Nibiru. The first tablet. So now we're reading from the first tablet. Here we go. The words of the Lord Enki, firstborn son of Anu, who reigns on Nibiru. With heavy spirit I utter laments. Laments that are bitter fill my heart. How smitten is the land, its people delivered to the evil wind, its stables abandoned, its sheepfolds empty. Yeah, it was, Sumer was reduced to dust. That's why the Sumerians just disappeared. They got wiped out by a nuclear war. How smitten are the cities? Their people piled up as dead corpses afflicted by the evil wind. How smitten are the fields, their vegetation withered, touched by the evil wind. How smitten are the rivers, nothing swims anymore, pure sparkling waters turned into poison. Of its black-headed people, Sumer is emptied, gone is all life. Of its cattle and sheep, Samir is emptied. Silent is the hum of churning milk. In its glorious cities, only the wind howls. Death is the only smell. The temples whose heads to heaven arose by their gods have been abandoned. Of lordship and kingship command there is none. Scepter and tiara are now gone. On the banks of the two great rivers, once lush and life-giving, only weeds grow. No one treads the highways. No one seeks out the roads. Flourishing Sumir is like an abandoned desert. How smitten is the land, home of gods and men. On that land a calamity fell, one unknown to man. A calamity that mankind had never before seen, one that could not be withstood. On all the lands from west to east, a disruptive hand of terror was placed. The gods in their cities were helpless as man. An evil wind, a storm born in a distant plain, a great calamity wrought in its path. A death-dealing wind born in the west, its way to the east has made, its course set by fate. A storm devouring as the deluge, by wind and not by water, a destroyer by poisoned air, not tidal waves overwhelming. By fate, not destiny, was it engendered. The great gods and their council, the great calamity had caused. By Enlil and Nirhashag, it was permitted. I alone for a halt was beseeching. Day and night to accept what the heavens decree, I argue, to no avail. So he's basically saying he tried to stop it. They wouldn't listen to him. Ninurta, Enlil's warrior son, and Nergal, my very own son, poisoned weapons in the great plain, then unleashed them. That an evil wind shall follow the brilliance we knew not. Thy now cry in agony. They act like they didn't know what these weapons were going to do. They'd never used them before. You almost see them as almost in the same place that we are now with our technology. It's almost as if that's where they were at, you know, a little bit more advanced than us. They could travel places, but you know, but before anybody ever dropped a nuclear weapon, nobody knew what it was going to do, even though they had that technology, you know, and knew about it, but just didn't, you know, they didn't know. Seems like this was kind of the same way. In their holy cities, the gods stood disbelieving as the evil wind towards Sumer made its way. One after another, the gods fled their cities, their temples abandoned to the wind. In my city, Eridu, as the poison cloud approached, I could do nothing to stop it. Escape to the open steppe, to the people I gave instructions. With Ninki, my spouse, the city I abandoned. In his city, Nippur, place of the bond heaven earth, Enlil could do nothing to stop it. The evil wind against Nippur was onrushing in his celestial boat, UFO. Pretty clear, celestial boat. Give me a break. Enlil and his spouse hurriedly took off. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, the tough gods, you know, these almighty, all-powerful, all-loving gods, you know, puke. Drop nuclear weapons on us, then get in their fucking spaceships and haul ass out of here. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? You know, as above, so below, right? Sounds like what they want to do to us. You know, the past is prologue. Like what it said at the beginning of this, something to that effect. What's happened in the past determines the future. You know, so the gods, the extraterrestrials, they dropped nuclear weapons on us and they hauled ass in their spaceships and got the fuck out of here and then, you know, left us all down here to die. That very well could be what's going to happen again. A lot of evidence pointing that direction, isn't there? In Sumer's city of kingship, Nanar to his father Enlil for help cried. In the place of the temple that to the heaven in 7 steps rises, Nanar, the hand of fate, refused to heed. My father who begot me, great God who to had granted kingship, turn the evil wind away, Nanar pleaded. Great God who decrees the fates, let and its people be spared, your praises to continue. Nanar appealed. Enlil answered his son, Nanar, noble son, your wondrous city kingship was granted. Eternal reign, it was not granted. Take hold of your spouse, Ningal, flee the city. Even I who decree fates, its destiny, I cannot bend. Thus did Enlil, my brother, speak. Alas, alas, not a destiny it was. A calamity none greater since the deluge, gods and earthlings has befallen. Alas, not a destiny it was. The great deluge was destined to happen. The great calamity of the death-dealing storm was not. So they're saying that, again, really reinforcing that idea that the great deluge, the great flood, was destined to happen, but the death-dealing storm was not. Well, what makes that interesting is that historically people are often confused, because there was more than one great flood on this planet. There's more than one great deluge. And the reason that we know that is true scientifically is, again, because of that layer of pre-flood ash. So according to this, we have the great deluge. We have this great calamity of nuclear weapons unleashed, which, again, all across the earth, deep underground, there's a layer of pre-deluge, pre-flood ash. So according to this, we had a great deluge. We have the nuclear decimation of Earth, reducing it to ash. Then we had another flood after that at some point. And that's proven because it's proven that there was a flood after this event that caused the Earth to be reduced to ashes. That's very interesting. And you see that reference that there was more than one flood. You hear that talked about. By the breach of a vow, by a council decision, it was caused. By weapons of terror was it created. By a decision, not destiny, were the poisoned weapons unleashed. By deliberation was the lot cast. So they're saying that this was done with, impunity. This was done on purpose. There was no accident that these nuclear weapons were deployed. Against Marduk, my firstborn, did the two sons destruction direct. Vengeance was in their hearts. Ascendancy is not Marduk's to grasp. And Lil's firstborn shouted, with weapons I shall oppose him, Ninurta said. Of people he raised an army, Babili as earth's navel to declare. Nergal, Marduk's brother, so shouted. In the council of the great gods, words of venom were spread. Day and night I raised my opposing voice. Peace I counsel, deploring haste. For the second time, the people have raised his heavenly image. Why does opposing continue? I asked in pleading. Have all the instruments been checked? Did not the era of Marduk in the heavens arrive? I once more inquired. Ningish Zeta, my very son, other signs of heaven cited. His heart, I knew, Marduk's injustice to him could not forgive. Ninartu and Lil on Earthborn was unrelenting too. Marduk, my temple in the North City, his own abode made, so he said. Ishkur and Lil's youngest son demanded punishment. In my lands to whore after him the people he made, he said. Utu, son of Ninar, Marduk's son Nabu, his wrath directed. And this goes on, and this is like on and on. This is like an argument. I'm gonna fuck you up. No, I'm gonna fuck you up. I'm gonna fuck you up. No, I'm gonna fuck you up. On, pissing contest, essentially. Nergal, lord of the lower domain, ferociously was demanding, let the olden weapons of terror for obliteration be used. The olden weapons of terror for obliteration, meaning that those were, something from the weapons of the past of this civilization. Kind of like what we see people in the future will see nuclear weapons on Earth. Let the olden weapons of terror for obliteration be used. At my own son I gazed in disbelief, for brother against brother the terror weapons have been forsworn. Sounds familiar. I mean, why do we think we're in a constant state of war? I mean, that was Bramley's sort of whole premise for the gods of Eden. Well, there you go. That's all we know. That's what the people who created us, or who we call gods, who we are the victims of a gigantic science experiment of. We are. No wonder nobody's ever tried to. No wonder other extraterrestrial races haven't tried to get a hold of us, man. No, we're the bastard sons of the universe. We are. We're the redheaded stepchildren of the galaxy. And we wonder why we arm against each other, why we have weapons, and we're all people, man. Why do we want to kill each other? Because the people of the bloodlines who are in positions of power around the globe, from presidents to congressmen to senators to royalty to the crown to all across the board, banking houses, religious institutions, all of these bloodline people are trying to become gods themselves. And to become like their gods, their creators, our creators, to become like them because they feel that because they are of the pure bloodline, that gives them the right to do it. It gives them the right to do everything that their creators did. And if that means endless war and everybody killing each other, then so be it, because that's what they did. For brother against brother, the terror weapons have been forsworn. Instead of consent, there was silence. In the silence, Enlil opened his mouth. Punishment there must be. Like birds without wings, the evildoers shall be. Marduk and Nabu of our heritage are depriving us of our heritage. Let them deprive the place of the celestial chariots. I'm sort of reading this slow and kind of, it's just, all the words are kind of reversed into what we would say it. So I'm trying to reverse them a little bit and say them, so they're easier to understand for you. Let this place be scorched to oblivion, Ninurta shouted. Let the one who scorches be me. I mean, let me do it. Let me fucking set this place on fire. Let's scorch this motherfucker to oblivion. Let's drop, but let me pull the trigger. That's what Ninurta is saying. Excited, Nergal stood up and shouted, let the evildoer cities also be upheavaled. The sinning cities let me obliterate. Let the annihilator my name be thereafter. The earthlings by us created, the earthlings that were created by us must not be harmed. The righteous with the sinners must not be perished, I forcefully said. Ninarshag, my creating helpmate, was consenting. The matter is between the gods alone to settle. The people must not be harmed. I knew from the celestial abode to the discussions was giving much heed. I knew who determines fates from his celestial abode, his voice made heard. Let the weapons of terror be used this once. Let the place of the rocket ships be obliterated. Let the people be spared. Let Ninurta the Scorcher be. Let Nergal be the Annihilator. So did Enlil announce the decision. To them a secret of the gods I shall reveal. The hiding place of the terror weapons to them I shall disclose. The two sons, one mine, one his, to his inner chamber Enlil summoned. Nergal, as he went by me, averted his gaze to me. Alas, I cried out without words, brother has turned against brother. Are the prior times fated to repeat? A secret from the olden times to them Enlil was revealing. They had entrusted in their hands the weapons of terror. Clad with terror, with a brilliance they are unleashed, and they touch to dust and turn and heap dust, turn everything into dust, essentially is what they're saying. For brother against brother on earth they were forsworn, and neither region to effect. Now the oath was undone like a broken jar in useless pieces. The two sons, full of glee, with quickened step from Enlil's chambers emerged for and the weapons departing. I mean, they launched the weapons. The other gods turned their back to the cities. None of his own calamity had a foreboding. Which means, they got the fuck out of there. Now this is the account of the prior times and of the weapons of terror. Before the prior times was the beginning. After the prior times was the olden times. In the olden times, the gods came to earth and created the earthlings. In the prior time, none of the gods were on earth, and the earthlings were not yet fashioned. They were not yet made. In the prior times, the abode of the gods was on their own planet. Nibiru is its name. A great planet, reddish in radiance, around the sun, an elongated circuit Nibiru makes. It has a long orbit, allegedly. For a time in the cold is Nibiru engulfed, for part of its circuit by the sun strongly is it heated. So every time it does a rotation, it gets so close to the Earth that it heats up. But because it's got such a slow orbit, life was able to flourish there, essentially, is what they're saying. A thick atmosphere envelops Nibiru by volcanic eruptions. All manner of life this atmosphere sustains, but without the atmosphere, there will only be dying, perishing. In the cold period, the inner heat of Nibiru keeps the planet warm, like a warm coat. In the hot period, it shields Nibiru from the sun's scorching rays. In the midst, I guess, in the springtime, it rains and it holds and releases to lakes and streams, giving rise. Lush vegetation our atmosphere feeds and protects. All manner of life in the waters and on land has been caused to sprout. After eons of time, our own species sprouted, and by our own essence, an eternal seed was used to procreate. Which basically says, yeah, an eternal seed was used to, I mean, something came along and created them. You know, they may be the gods that created mankind, but somebody created them too. Who was it? See, I mean, we're not even ready to ask that question as a people on this planet, are we? You know, that if there is a God or gods, most likely that God or gods has a God too, someone who created them. Well, who is that? You know, this is going to start to open up more questions than it is answers. As our numbers grew, to many regions of Nibiru, our ancestors spread. Some tilled the land, some four-legged creatures shepherded. Like, well, they had dogs, is what it means. I knew dogs were from another planet. Fucking cats too, bastards. I love dogs and cats though. They're great. Fucking love them. And sometimes, man, you get a good one. You're like, man, you are not from this planet. My cat, I don't know where the fuck planet my cat's from. He ain't from here though. I swear he's a spy from Sirius. Tries to get on computers, gets on people's computers and type shit. It's out of control. Some lived on the mountains, some in the valleys, and made their home. Some of them made their homes in the valleys. It's saying rivalries occurred, encroachments happened, clashes occurred, sticks became weapons. Clans gathered into tribes, and then two great nations faced each other. The nation of the north took arms against the nation of the south. And it talks about that they threw spears, which they call missiles, and they weapons of thunder and brilliance. You increase the terror. So they started out with, you know, sticks, and then it became weapons, guns, and then missiles, and then weapons of thunder. So, you know, it kind of sounds like the evolution of our weapons, doesn't it? You know, first it was sticks, then it was, you know, bows and arrows and you know, spears and all that, and swords. Then it became, you know, bullets and missiles and weapons of thunder, which, you know, that's our modern day weaponry, isn't it? Weather warfare, HARP and chemtrails. So, I mean, that almost, wow, that almost sounds like there was, you know, an evolution of weapons in the same way we've seen an evolution of weapons. A war long and fierce engulfed the planet, brother amassed against brother. There was death and destruction both north and south. For many circuits, desolation reigned the land and all life was diminished. So for many orbits, for many rotations around the sun, there was no life on Nibiru at all. Then a truce was declared and peacemaking was conducted. Let the nations be united, the emissaries said to one another. There they are, forming their world order. So this is great, isn't it? They have a war, brother against brother on the whole planet. Everybody wipes everybody out except for a few, and then the few that are left form a new world order where everybody's united. Sound familiar? I mean, that's what as above, so below means, folks. That's why they take that so seriously. As in the macrocosm, so in the microcosm. I mean, it looks like this is lining up to be our fate as well. Well, you know what? Just as it said here, is it fate or is it destiny? It was destiny for that for that flood to happen, but it was the fate of them to be wiped out by nuclear weapons. Well, this doesn't have to be our fate. Our fate can be determined by our actions or our inactions. But if we continue to not, do anything, if we, my goodness, like I've talked about, we got listeners in like 30-something countries now. Our listenership has just been going through the roof, but yet we have 3 or 4 or 5 out of, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of listeners that donate and support our work. Are we going to choose to do like we've always done and be lazy and assume this is somebody else's problem to handle? Or are we going to step up and change fate? Because if not, then this is what is going to be our fate. If we don't get involved and do something, this is going to be our fate. We are going to suffer the same fate that the people of old did. And something tells me the elite want it that way. That's exactly what they're planning. I want to play with the big boys. I want to play at the big boy level. We need cash to do that. Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable, just the epiphanies from reading stuff on air. It just blows me away. Let there be one throne on Nibiru, one king to reign over all. There it is, the new game's in town. Divide and conquer. Kill everybody, blow everybody, create all-out warfare, and then come in and pick up the pieces and create a new order. That's what their agenda is. Let a leader from north or from south by lot be chosen. One king supreme to be. If he be from north, let south choose a female to be his spouse, an equal queen to reign alongside him. If he's from the south, if they choose one from the south, let someone from the north, a female from the north, be his spouse. Husband and wife, let them be as one flesh to become. Let their firstborn son be the successor. Let a unified dynasty thus be formed, unity on Nibiru forever to establish. They set up a fucking monarchy is what they did. They set up the new game. Who's going to run the new game? They wipe everybody out, and then they set up a new game under that. And the people 100, 200, 300 years from now have no idea why life is the way it is, and nobody really questions it, and people just going around about their business, forgetting that 200, 300, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, everybody died, and somebody came in and set up the new game that they controlled, and people just think it's day to day, and they never know what happened. You see what happened to us? The same thing. They did it here. They did it on their planet, and then they seeded us with the ability to do it again ourselves. We've gone down the same road they are. You see these, we call them vicious cycles. A father is an alcoholic and a wife beater, and so, and then the son grows up and becomes an alcoholic and a wife beater, and then his son grows up and becomes, it's a vicious cycle. But all it takes to break that vicious cycle is one person standing up and saying, no more, not me. I'm not going to be the one that continues that vicious cycle. It ends here. And that's what we have to do as a people, folks. It's our only hope. We have to say, no, we are not going to allow this to play out the way it's played out before. Every person on this planet needs to know this information. We've got to get this out to the people. People need to know that our destiny is going to be death and destruction and the setting up of a new power structure, resetting the game, resetting the table, starting it all over again. And that's exactly what they want to do, because that's what their predecessors did. They're gods, the ones that tinkered on earth and created us in this whole thing. But someone can stand up to this eventually and say no more. And by God, there's never been a better time than now. It's got to be us. We have to be the ones that say, no, no, no. This vicious cycle ends here. Otherwise, it's going to continue on, and that's exactly what the elite want. And I bet they never counted on the fact we'd ever even identify it. But now that we have, it can't be held back anymore. The royal throne into one flesh combined. an unbroken line of kingship established, just like they did on earth. The first king after peace was made, a warrior of the north he was, a mighty commander. He was true and fair to the people. He was chosen because his degrees were accepted by all of the people. He built a splendid city to live in, and it was called Agade, which meant unity. So see how even the title of the city was uniting, you know, bringing everything together, bringing together the new order. For his reign, a royal title he was granted, and it was the celestial one. His name was On. And his name On means the celestial one. He strong-armed people into reestablishing new laws and regulations on the land. He appointed governors for each land and created restoration and reclamation tasks for the people. Of him in the royal annals, thus it was recorded, On the lands unified, peace on Nibiru he restored. He built a new city, the canals he repaired, there was abundance in the lands. For his spouse from the south, a maiden he had chosen, for both love and warring she was known. On 2 was her royal title. Cute, On 2, T-U, like number 2. And the leader who is On spouse, the given name cleverly did mean, yeah, On 2. Yeah, it even says, you know, oh, it's clever. It was cute that they did that. She bore On 3 sons and no daughters. The firstborn by her named Anki. Anki. You see, like Anu, Na Ki. Now it's just Anki. Now you're starting to see the lineage. See this? That's what this is. That's why he said, you know, this is the preface. This is of the times that came before. Well, that's what we're reading here. This is unbelievable. This is an account. I didn't know this. I wasn't aware of this. Wow. It's mind blowing now that I'm reading this. Now that I figured out what this is. Wow, man. This is killer. This is a genealogical record of the generations of people that came before what we know as the Anunnaki. This is the record of their lineage and of their lives and of what they did. And the reason this is important to us, this is amazing. You know, I mean, people, you know, say a lot of crap about these, you know, translations and stuff, blah, 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 you know. I think a lot of that's disinfo. I think a lot of people are like, oh, no, those aren't real. Those aren't true, you know, blah, blah. I think people are real scared of this. Because what this is doing is, and that's why it said, you know, what has happened in the past is important to the future, because they're showing what the bloodline lineage, the relatives, ancestors of the Anunnaki who came to Earth and seeded life, they're showing what they did in their lives and how they set things up. And by having that access to that knowledge, that's why this was one of the things that Enki wanted mankind to have, this book. He wanted mankind to know this, because something in this information was going to be a gift to us to save us from some fate that may be forced upon us by these custodians in the future. So this is unbelievable, man. I mean, this, it really, it's an account of the bloodlines, of the lineage, you know, and it talks about what they did in their times. And this is something we can learn from, especially when we see how, you know, this man against man, brother against brother fighting, and then the new order comes in. This information and stuff we are supposed to know, to learn something from it, to keep ourselves from going down the same route that people before us did. That's why this has been hidden from us. That's why they've, you know, gone into Iraq, gone into all of the museums and taken all these things. They don't want us to get our hands on this, because if we get our hands on this stuff and understand that what happened in the past also may happen in the future, if we don't learn what happened in the past and learn from that, you know, it's, again, just a paradigm shift. It all makes sense to me. Now, that's what all this shit's about, man. It was just kind of strange just reading this. And as I was reading this, I realized this is this is a genealogical account. So that somebody, somewhere, someday, you and I now, here in 2011, could gain some perspective or some knowledge from this. This is what secret societies, the original purpose of secret societies was. And what they did was they took that, corrupted it, and turned it, instead of being secret societies to teach us this, they turned it in secret societies are there to keep us from learning this. And only their people who are going to play the game their way and not tell people this are going to be initiated. This is the secret of the secret societies, ladies and gentlemen. Right here, you heard it right here on the show. I'm here to tell you right now today. This is it. This is what they've been hiding. This is what they didn't want us to know. These genealogical records of the ancestors of the people who came to Earth, the gods who came to Earth. This is what there's something in here, and we're going to find out because we're going to read all this on air. There is something we're supposed to learn here, whatever it is and what it all may be. Yet I just don't know, but it's something. Alone on the throne he was seated. He was supposed to choose a spouse twice, but it got postponed. Some of this stuff I'm not going to read verbatim. I'm just going to kind of give you the, kind of just put it into modern day terms. In his reign, concubines are brought into the palace. A son to him was not born. So they brought in bitches for him to bang. Essentially, they'll dumb it down for you. The dynasty thus began with the death of Anki, and there was no offspring. The middle son, though not firstborn, was pronounced the legal heir. So fascinating stuff here. And the idea of this, this being the genealogical record of the people that came before the ones that seeded the bloodlines on Earth, it's fascinating stuff. Because you see, now we know the answers to why mankind has lived in constant warfare. It's in our blood. And just like I talked about last night on the show, if you didn't listen to last night's show, go back and listen to it. All the shows this week, I suggest you listen to. 5 shows we got this week. I think all of them have been killer. And I'm on fire right now. Even more now, But, I was just talking about last night about really, realizing that I thought for the longest time that I wasn't working hard enough, or I wasn't. And it's not just that. The only thing that's holding back me getting my workout on to a larger scale is, cash backing. Everything is, you're going to have money to get anything out there now. It's not about talent or anything else. It's about how much money you have to put behind something. But once I realized that, I realized that I don't have to kill myself to do it. Trying to kill myself to do this is not the solution. It was not a hindrance. It was not a weapon against me anymore. And that's what we have to see this as. Once we're aware of this, yes, we do have it in our blood to be in constant warfare and the rest, but we can change it. Once we're aware of it and we realize that's not the way to go, and that's a mistake, and that people who existed on other planets even prior to Earth went through this, and that people thousands of years ago were trying to get a message to us saying, hey, don't go the way we did. You got it in your blood too, because you're of us and you're like us. And since you're so much like us, you're going to go the same route we did, and a lot of people are going to die, and it's not going to be good. Here's the warning. And the elite who set up the priest class, who set up the banking houses, the religions, the power structure, the crown, the authority, the tyranny, everything, said we can't allow them to know this because we won't be able to rule if they know it. We are pushing the envelope now. I mean, can you feel it? We are in the age of awakening, folks. This is it. All is going to be revealed. It is being revealed right now on this show as you're listening. We are the generation that this stuff has to stop with. We have the information. We have the power. Our task now is to wake the people up from their slumber, and it's time to stop playing nice. I hope you'll send this broadcast to somebody. I hope you'll get it out there when it appears on YouTube, when it appears on my archives. Get it out there. Let people hear it, man. Let's do this. God, this is unbelievable. Every day is a new mind-blowing, paradigm-blowing day for me. I mean, every day. And it should be for you, too. If you're staying on top of your research, you're paying attention to stuff like what I do, it will be. Never give up. Never let up. He who ignores the past is someone who is not going to know what's going to happen in the future. And this was recorded for us so that we wouldn't make the same mistakes that they made. And unfortunately, well, trying to figure out how to repair your atmosphere and stuff like that sounds like we're pretty much already there, doesn't it? My life senses returned to me as if awakened from the deepest sleep by the sound of the calling of my name. I was in some kind of an enclosure. It was dark, but there was also an aura. Then my name was called again by the deepest of voices, and although I could hear it, I could not tell whence the voice came, nor could I see whoever it was that spoke, and I said, "Here I am." Oh, wait, I've already read this. Did we get our page thrown off here? Yeah, I did. Wow. I don't remember what page we left off on. Well, it stinks. Let me just scroll through the page. Bear with me for a minute. Oh, here we go. Yeah, because this is, we were way past that. Yeah, this is basically continuing on the sort of genealogical history of the ancestors of the Anunnaki who came to Earth and seeded life on Earth, and so this is their historical and genealogical record here. Try to see how much of this we read. It's talking essentially about how there was great cataclysms, there was nuclear weapons unleashed, and then somehow it was just interesting because after he said brother was pitted against brother, and then all of their people on their planet were wiped out. And then out of those ashes, like the phoenix out of the ashes, which is interesting because that's one of the symbols of the brotherhood, the double-headed phoenix. Arose these bloodlines and these kings and queens and set up the new game. And so here they're talking about the circuit of Nibiru, which is the orbit of Nibiru. A destiny it is in the orbit of Nibiru embedded. So they're saying that there's, the destiny of what's to happen on their planet and our planet is hidden in the orbit of Nibiru. And many people out there believe that this comet Elenin, which is going to pass near to Earth very soon, is actually the famed Nibiru. I don't really believe that myself, but I don't not believe it either. You know what I mean? I'm just sort of, could go either way. Others of knowledge of the orbit did not consider the Nibiru's destiny to be tied with that orbit. They found that there was a breaching in their atmosphere. Volcanoes, the atmosphere were belching and spitting up. I'm sort of, as I was doing Friday night, I'm sort of kind of going over. Some of this stuff is in kind of a weird. It doesn't really translate well in modern day English. So I'm kind of summarizing it all for you because it just sounds dumb to read. Volcanoes, the atmosphere forbear, less belching, were spitting up. I'd rather just say there were volcanoes and shit was coming out of them, Nibiru's air has been made thinner. The protective shit lid has been diminished. I think it's supposed to say shield, but it says shit lid. Is that what they call it in ancient Samaria? The shit lid? Yeah, get that shit lid up there, boy, before we burn to death. Ah, damn, put some duct tape and some baling wire on it. Do whatever you got to do. Keep us from burning up. I think Bill Hicks was right. We've been invaded by rednecks from another world. In the reign of Anshar and Kishar, pestilences appeared, and they could not overcome them. Their son Anshar ascended to the throne, and he was of the sixth dynasty of rule on Nibiru. His name became Master of the Shar. With great understanding, he was born. So when he was born, he was already, he already had knowledge when he was born. He was born with a great knowledge of something. With much learning, he mastered much knowledge. To remedy the afflictions in the ways he sought to remedy the afflictions of people. And he spent much time studying the orbit of Nibiru. In its looping of the sun, 5 family members embraced the planets of dazzling beauty for cures to the afflictions of their atmosphere. He examined the atmosphere. So they were finding out that people were dying on their planet, and the reason that was because of their atmosphere being depleted. To each he gave a name. Ancestral forefathers he honored as heavenly couples. He considered them. On and Onto were like twin planets. He called the first 2 that he encountered On and Onto. Beyond Nibiru's orbit were Anshar and Kishar, and they were the largest in size. As a messenger, Gaga among the others' course, sometimes first Nibiru meet. I think Gaga is Jupiter or Saturn or one of those. So there's your occultic reference and your occultic explanation behind Lady Gaga. Oh, you didn't know that? Yeah, that's where they came from. It's all, I mean, come on. She's Italian too. Give me a fucking break. These guys in the priest class that run the music industry and all this, they're all well aware of this stuff. I mean, every one of her videos, Lady Gaga's videos, one of her first videos, there's, Sirius in the background to the twin dogs. I mean, there's occultic stuff in every single one of those. That's not there by mistake. And it's not put there by her either. Don't confuse that. The most of the time, the guys in the A&R departments at the major record labels are the ones that are the occultists and are into this. And, they suggest, hey, you should put this in there. And they say, oh, okay, cool, whatever you want, yay. Give me some more Coke and $1 million. I'll do whatever you want. 5 in all were Nibiru's heavenly greeters as the sun it circled. Beyond, like a boundary, the hammered bracelet of the sun encircled. As a guardian of the heavens' forbidden region with havoc, it protected. Other children of the sun, 4 in number from intrusion, the bracelet shielded. The atmospheres of the great 5 greeters Inchar set out to study. So some sort of loop, which interesting because I've just had this story here tonight and already closed out of it, damn it. Let me see if I can get back to it. That's just odd that it's talking about this bracelet that came from the sun that actually protected part of their atmosphere during the time in which it came around. And I have this story here tonight, and I didn't cover it, and I was thinking, no, I'll just skip that one. Here it is. Kind of seems synchronistic now. Maybe there's a connection to this. It says, it's from the Daily Mail, discovery of magnetic ropes that cause solar storms will help prepare Earth for space weather damage. So they discovered these ropes that precede these solar flares, which should be able to help us be able to understand when these are going to happen and protect against them. And I'll put a link to that in the chat room so you can check it out on your own, but it just seems highly coincidental and seems almost very similar to what they're describing here as this. Maybe it was something about these ropes, as they're calling here in this Daily Mail article. Maybe that's what the bracelet was, shielding the planet. In its repeating orbit the 5 in Nibiru's loop carefully were examined. The 5 planets in the same orbit as Nibiru were carefully examined. They observed what types of atmospheres that these planets possessed. And with celestial chariots, they intensely were examined. Oh, right. So they sent spaceships to examine the planets closer. That's what it is, celestial chariots. Come on. The findings were astounding. The discoveries confusing. From orbit to orbit, Nibiru's atmosphere seemed to have more breaching. In the councils of the learned, cures were avidly debated. Ways to bandage the wound were urgently considered. A new shield to embrace the planet was attempted. All that was thrust up back to the ground came down. In the councils of the learned, the belching volcanoes were studied. The atmosphere by belching volcanoes that were created by the volcanoes. Oh, God, I'm just trying to figure out a way to say this. The atmosphere by belching volcanoes had been created as wound by their diminished belching had come to be. And it just doesn't, So these volcanoes cause their atmosphere, or one of the causes of their atmosphere to be depleted. It says here that they basically figured out how to make a new invention that would utilize the volcanoes to basically solve their problem. And so they were actually trying to get the volcanoes to keep spewing, even though they wanted them to stop before. Now they were hoping that the volcanoes would start to spew again because whatever solution they come up with needed that to happen in order for it to work. In the reign of Inshar, the breach in the skies grew bigger. It didn't rain. The wind blew harder. And there was no water that came out of the ground. On the lands, there was an accusation the breasts of mothers were dry. In the palace, there was distress, and an accusation therein took hold. As first his wife, Inshar, a half-sister, did espouse by the law of the seed abiding. Ninshar, she was called, who bears the shars of the lady, a son she did not bear. By a concubine to Inshar, a son was born. The firstborn son he was. By Ninshar, first wife and half-sister, a son was not brought forth. By the law of succession, the concubine's son to the throne ascended. The 7th to reign he was. Du-Uro was his royal name, and the dwelling place fashioned its meaning. In the house of concubines, not in the palace, he was indeed conceived. So he was like, he was like the George Bush of his time, I suppose. The bastard son who ascended to power, the more like the Bill Clinton of his time, huh? Yeah. I don't know if they still know who Bill Clinton's dad was. His mom was a dirty, dirty whore. Damn, man. She fucked so many dudes. They didn't know who the fuck Bill's dad was. I think somebody said it was, that guy from Hee Haw. Junior Samples or some shit like that. I think somebody said Junior Samples was his dad. And somebody at Dilly Plaza told me that one time. As his spouse, a maiden from his youth beloved Duru chose. And, that's interesting. So, Duru, the bastard son who took over power, chose his wife because he loved her, not because she was in the bloodline. Uh-oh. Well, this is interesting, man. This story's starting to get thick. Now we're starting to see why, we need to learn this. This sounds very similar to the history of some of our kings and queens and power structure on earth, doesn't it? Da-Uru was her royal name. She who is by my side was the meaning. Wow, that's kind of a downgrade from, the wife before. What she was like, the one who does something in the sky. This is like, the bitch who stands by my side all the time. Wow, that's just beautiful, man. Wonderful, wonderful poetry there. In the royal court, confusion was rampant. Sons were not heirs. Wives were not half-sisters. In the land, the suffering was increasing. Fields had no abundance. The plants wouldn't grow. And among the people, fertility was diminished. I mean, nobody was getting pregnant, means nobody was being born, so their population was diminishing fast. In the palace, fertility was absent. Neither son nor daughter was brought forth. Of On's seed, 7 were the rulers. Then of his seed, the throne was dry. So On, which is funny because On is, if you know if you study the genealogical history of the Anunnaki, On was, the Anunnaki were the Anunnaki were the princes of, the one God, princes of the guy who he was the son, the forefathers. They were the forefathers of, the one who was the first person that started the bloodline, and that was On. And so after 7 of On's bloodline were the rulers, they no longer had one of On's bloodline in rule. Daru, a child at the palace gateway, was embraced as a son. Duru, in the end, was adopted. His name became Lama, meaning dryness. In the palace, the princes were very mad, and they were complaining to the council of counselors. In the end, Lama ascended the throne. Though not of On's seed, he was the 8th to reign. Now, that's very interesting. He sounds very much like a Akhenaten type character, In the councils of the learned to heal the breach, there were 2 suggestions. One was to use a metal to fix their atmosphere, a metal by the name of gold. On Nibiru, it was greatly rare. Within the hammered bracelet, it was abundant. So the zone, I guess, the hammered bracelet may be where we're talking about the asteroid belt. It was the only substance that to the finest powder could be ground up and put in high into the heaven, into the atmosphere, and would stay suspended. Thus, with replenishments, the breach would heal and it would have better protection. Let the celestial boats be built. Let a celestial fleet fleet the gold to Nibiru bring over. So here they are. They're talking about let's create ships and go somewhere out, on the other side of our solar system and find some gold and bring it back here. Funny, that would just be the one thing our monetary system just happened to be based on, huh? Get us all to mine it, get us all to build our whole, fight and kill each other for, 3,500 years or 3,600 years or however long it is, and then create this power structure, then get everybody to hoard it in one spot. And then when the Anunnaki come back and tell us,
pathetic earthlings, bow down to me. We are the Anunnaki, and we have returned for our gold. We will take it back to our planet and leave you pathetic earthlings here on the planet to die.
Stranger things have happened. Probably what it's going to be, isn't it? Folks, you're going to have to get this gold right now, folks, because Anunnaki want to take the gold away from you, folks. Ted's got a great deal on Jugo for you today, and you need to get it now, because you don't have much time left, folks. The Anunnaki are going to take your gold, folks, and I'm fucking mad about it. Yeah, you'll probably hear that before it's over with. Let weapons of terror be created. Now, we've established from reading William Bramley and reading the rest of this that the weapons of terror they refer to are the nuclear weapons of mass destruction. So they're saying they should, go to this planet or wherever it is and just launch nuclear weapons and blow the shit out of stuff and go in and pick up all the gold. For a decision, Lama was too feeble. What did he know about making that kind of a choice? One orbit of Nibiru was completed. In the fields, affliction was not diminished. the volcanoes continued belching and the atmosphere was still not repaired. A third shar passed. A fourth was a shar is a year in Nibiru, by the way. It's a marking of or a year or marking of a sort of passage of time. So when they say a third shar passed and a fourth shar passed, that's a notation of time, by the way. Still, the gold was not obtained. In the land, there was still strife. Strife was abundant. There was no food, no water. Everybody in the lands were disjointed. Everybody was accusing each other. Everybody's running around basically like a chicken with their head cut off, not knowing who to blame, playing the blame game. And there's basically saying, well, then if this is our destiny to die like this, then doing or we can't really do anything about it. In the royal court, the princes were astir. The king's accusations were directed foolishly, unreasoning, and greater calamities instead of a cure he brought forth. From the olden storehouses, weapons were retrieved. Of rebellion, there was much speaking. A prince in the royal palace was the first to take up arms. And now they're having civil unrest. And they went up to Lama and attacked him. And they killed Lama, the eighth ruler. Lama is no more. The king is no more, with glee, he announced. To the throne room, Alalu rushed. On the throne, he himself seated. Without right or counsel, a king, he pronounced himself king. In the land, all unity was lost. Some rejoiced the death of Lama. Some were saddened by it. Now, this is the account of the kingship of Alalu and of the going to earth. So when this guy, so what's essentially what they're telling us is that this guy Lama died, and this guy Alalu, who just, wasn't anybody, basically came in and said, I'm not of the bloodline. I'm just a regular person. I'm taking over. And now that I'm taking over and I'm the new game in town, I'm saying that we're going to Earth and we're going to go get the gold there. So there was no talk of going to Earth and mining Earth. That's interesting. By the power structure of people that existed on the throne in Nibiru, there was no talk of even going to Earth to do this until this usurper came in and basically took over the throne by, sheer brute force. He came in, killed the king, took over and became king, and said, we're going to Earth to get the gold to fix this problem. That's very interesting. This is why they say that the Anunnaki, the people that came to Earth and did the things that they did and created humans and all this stuff, were pursued from some of the other inhabitants of Nibiru. They were pursued by other Anunnaki. So that kind of clears that up a little bit, doesn't it? So it wasn't that we were even, invaded or genetically manipulated by people who were, of the royal bloodline. These were basically usurpers. We were, that's kind of an unbelievable thing. In the land, the unity was lost. And many people did not like the kingship of this guy, Alalu, just coming in and saying, I'm taking over. I'm the new game in town. You can imagine that. Princes were agitated. The counselors were distraught. From father to son, secession from on to the throne continued. Even Lama the eighth, by adoption, a son was proclaimed. Who was Alalu? Was he a legal heir? Was he a firstborn? By what right did he usurp? Was he not a king slayer? Before the seven who judge Alalu was summoned, his fate to consider. So they bring into